GZERO Media is here at the World Bank IMF Spring Meetings. Obviously, conversations about the impact of the war in Iran are front and center. I am here right now with Rania Al-Mashat, former Minister of Planning, Economic Development, and International Cooperation in Egypt. Hi.
Nice to see you again, Tony.
It's great to see you as well. And I want to start on those impacts. So IMF is already cutting forecasts across Middle East and North Africa based on things like food shortages, fuel prices, fertilizer. This sounds a bit like the impact of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Are there similarities? What are the differences?
Absolutely. There are many similarities. You have, as we've seen, exchange rate movements that have exacerbated the price impacts from the fuel increase. But what is different this time is not just the price, but also the risk with the availability and ability of trade to move and products to move freely between countries. So the uncertainty that we see today is, I would say, much bigger than the uncertainty we had during the Russia-Ukraine crisis at the time. The other issue is, at that point in time, there was within the global community, I would say a little bit more trust, if you will. Today, we have, an issue related to the geopolitics of the whole situation. So that also is an element. But in both cases, the duration is something that we did not know.
Right, of
and
course.
This is a very big similarity.
So this has the potential to be even more impactful.
We hope not. But the longer it takes to resolve it, the bigger the implications, and this time not just on emerging and developing economies, but on the world altogether. And that's why when you take a look at the regional growth rate forecasts, also the global forecasts are down, and the inflation implications, which have implications on monetary policy, on fiscal policy. And when that happens in the developed world, it also has ripple effects on developing economies as well.
So we also heard from the IMF a warning to countries that have deep oil reserves to stop hoarding, to stop export controls. But how realistic is that really?
So another element when you asked about what's the difference between now and 2022, today, when you look at the numbers, and that's why the IMF mentioned this, is that there is abundance of oil supply. It's there. It's not that there's a fall or a shortage. But the idea is, how can you get that oil to the places it needs it, given the trade restrictions? It's a very noble call. I think it falls on the effectiveness of international cooperation and our ability to work in the multilateral system. And it may not be as easy as before. So it will take interlocutors such as the IMF to show the implications globally of not being able to do this. And the implications not just on a group of countries or a set of countries, but an implication on growth, jobs, capital flows, expectations from investors all across.
I'm struck by something Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, said in Davos that really rippled across the world, that the global order as we've known it is ruptured, but also now is a time for middle powers. So when you look at this particular crisis, how do you see middle powers or different new alliances coming together?
Well, thank you for that question, Tony. And, we've been discussing and hearing about reforming the international financial architecture for some time. And we have the World Bank and the IMF and other institutions. There's the Bretton Woods Commission looking at how the institutions should work differently, how capital should be mobilized, etc. So this has been a conversation that's taking on for some time. What we're seeing this spring meetings is the rise of many regional initiatives, which mean that new formations of cooperation is taking place. For instance, the V20 most vulnerable countries are in discussions with the OPEC Development Fund, and this was mentioned by Prime Minister Mia Mottley, in order to try and secure long-term financing for health, for education, for water, which is very scarce because of the climate issues. So this is an alliance which a few years ago we did not hear about. When we take a look at central banks in the Caribbean, they're also working together for debts, swaps between themselves to avail liquidity at a time of crunch. When we take a look at Africa, there's also an African liquidity facility which is in the making to be able to also benefit from that, and more discussions for deeper capital markets to benefit from the very high savings so that the continent can benefit from its own resources rather than from external resources of finance. So you see these regional associations coming up, ideas, and that is what distinguishes, I would say, this spring meetings from when we met last time.
So do you see those regional alliances that you're describing as complementary to multilateralism as we've known it, or is it a sign that these institutions that have existed for 80 years are increasingly irrelevant?
No, I mean, I used to work in these institutions as a minister of planning, economic development, and international cooperation for many years. These institutions are important. They are not irrelevant. But what is required is, the adaptability to the crises that are taking place now and the aspirations of countries. So, for instance, for all the countries today, what is the development trajectory? How can we ensure that not more people are going to fall into the hunger, into no more jobs, etc. So, pushing the financing with the development trajectory, I think those are going to be key. And that's why, and this was also mentioned in the discussions the past few days, in the COVID crisis, there was liquidity availed for countries. With what's happening now, we have not seen new windows, even though the fiscal burden and the capital outflight from emerging markets has been quite massive. And of course, their borrowing costs and so forth. So it's not a replacement of the multilateral system, but it is a complementary because there's urgent need to be able to face crises which are happening more frequently and with different magnitudes.
When we last spoke, in fact, it was here, we talked about tourism as being a bright spot for Egypt's economy. When I look at what's happening in the region right now and Iran's strategy, strikes in Dubai, strikes in Doha, do you think that confidence from Western investors, from tourists, has been rattled? And is that temporary, or will we see longer term consequences of that?
So once again, it goes to the key point of how durable, how long this crisis is going to continue. If it's going to be resolved within a few weeks, I think we can, say it's transitory and it will not have structural and permanent implications. If it lingers on, then absolutely the psychology around the region, the psychology of investment, and you know better than anyone with looking at the capital flows, it's very easy to, with money being so mobile, it's very easy to change. The other issue with tourism today is the affordability issue. If prices of fuel continue to be high, if prices of food continue to be high, if growth rates are going to decline in emerging and developed markets, then it means that the extra amount of money to be able to travel and enjoy yourself and your family is going to get tighter. And therefore, tourism, to me, the biggest downside risk is going to be the affordability. If the affordability crisis continues, then we have a whole sector being implicated. And that's, again, one of the unsettling implications of this war.
Finally, I do want to ask you, so you have recently become a commissioner of a newly formed Future of Development Cooperation Coalition. Did I get that right? So tell me a bit about the goals there and why it was established.
Again, for all the discussions that we are doing, and as you mentioned, regional solutions, global solutions, multilateral development banks, bilateral partners, global public goods, so many terminologies, so many institutions. How can we make development cooperation more effective? And when we say more effective, we mean affecting the people. So there's a lot in terms of not rethinking development cooperation, but reimagining it. And trying to see what are the big bets for the future, trying to make sure that the agency of countries is there. And when we say countries, we mean everybody in the country. Government, private sector, civil society, but at the end of the day to ensure the delivery of the goods that people need. And when we say here health, education, trade, investment. So it's going to be, it's a 1-year exercise where we will have consultations with countries, academicians, to ensure that we come up with what reflects everything that we have been not just talking about, but observing, and also reflecting on, as you mentioned, what Prime Minister Carney had mentioned in Davos, and see how we are reimagining development cooperation to make it more effective, more durable, and also where are the big bets so that we can actually enforce and foster more international cooperation.
Rania Al-Mashat, thanks so much for coming by.